In the dying light of the 41st millennium, where the Astronomicon flickers like a candle in an endless storm, there exists a brotherhood bound not by glory, but by shame. They are the Black Shields, Space Marines, who have cast aside their chapter colors, their heraldry ground to dust, their names spoken only in whispers. Some serve the Death Watch in penance, others wander the void as masterless knights, but all carry the weight of oaths broken and honor stained. This is the tale of the last such brotherhood, and the final oath that would either redeem them or damn them for eternity. The galaxy trembles on the precipice of a new age of darkness, where ancient technologies stir in forgotten tombs, and the very fabric of reality grows thin. In the shadow of the Great Rift, where warp storms birth nightmares into reality, a company of these nameless warriors gathers around a leader whose own resurrection has become both blessing and curse. We truly love and care for you, dear listener, and it is in this spirit of companionship that we share this chronicle of sacrifice and redemption. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let's get started. In the dying light of distant stars, where the ghoul stars cast their pallid glow across the void, a cathedral of twisted metal drifted through the endless dark. The space hulk Mortis Eternal turned slowly in its ancient dance. 17 kilometers of fused warships and forgotten dreams welded together by centuries of cosmic violence. Its hull bore the scars of 1,000 battles, adamantium plates buckled and torn, Gothic spires jutting from imperial cruiser bones like the ribs of some primordial beast. Within its cavernous depths, the final Vox transmissions of the Iron Sentinel's chapter echoed endlessly, their death song a mournful hymn to duty's ultimate price. The void screamed with silence, punctuated only by the ghostly whispers of warriors who had made their final stand in corridors now thick with frost and shadow. These were the forgotten reaches of the galaxy, where hope withered and legends came to die. Yet still the dead called out across the darkness, their voices carrying truths that few would dare to hear. We truly love and care for you, dear listener, and it is in this spirit of companionship that we share this chronicle of sacrifice and redemption. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let's get started. Captain Thaddeus Caney stood upon the command deck of the strike cruiser Penitent's Blade, his ceramite boots planted firmly against decking that bore no heraldry, no proud colors, no legacy of honor. Where once the golden fist of dawn had adorned his shoulder guards, now only matte black remained, the color of shame, of exile, of oaths broken and brotherhood lost. His face, scarred by a dozen deaths and as many resurrections, carried the weight of centuries that stretched far beyond any mortal span. Each line etched into his features told of battles fought not for glory, but for something far more elusive, redemption that seemed to slip further away with each passing year. Behind him, his warriors worked in practiced silence, their movements efficient despite bearing the same mark of dishonor that branded their captain. These were the Black Shields of the Death Watch, who had chosen a different path, not service in the name of the Emperor's holy Ordo Xenos, but exile among the stars, bound together by the mysterious last oath that had become both their salvation and their curse. The last oath. Even thinking the words sent a familiar chill through Caney's enhanced physiology. It was a ritual shrouded in grim necessity, capable of snatching a warrior from the very threshold of the Emperor's side and returning him to the battlefield. But resurrection came at a price that few could comprehend. Each time the ancient rites called him back from death's embrace, fragments of memory scattered like autumn leaves, pieces of his soul offered as payment to whatever dark powers governed the ritual. Sometimes he wondered if the man who had once served the imperial fists with such unwavering pride had died long ago, leaving only this hollow shell animated by duty and desperate hope. "Captain," Brother Voss reported from the auger station, his voice carrying the distinctive rasp of a damaged Vox grill. The former salamander's massive frame was encased in the same featureless black as the rest of them, his chapter's proud heritage erased as thoroughly as their own. The Iron Sentinel's final transmission indicates they were pursuing something from the Metallica system, the signals still broadcasting from the Hulk's core. Kaney's jaw tightened at the mention of that cursed Forge world. Metallica, one of the Adeptus Mechanicus's most secretive bastions, where the boundary between flesh and machine blurred beyond recognition. If the Iron Sentinels had died pursuing something from that technological nightmare, then whatever lay within the Hulk's belly was worth more than mere salvage rights. "How many times have you died for the Imperium, my lord?" The question came from Apothecary Null, his voice barely above a whisper as he approached from the shadows. The former blood angel moved with fluid grace, but there was something hollow in his movements, as if each step carried him further from the man he had once been. Kaney did not answer immediately. The question cut too close to the heart of his torment. Each resurrection stripped away another layer of who he had been, until sometimes he felt like an actor playing a role in someone else's story. Was he fighting for redemption, or had he simply become a weapon honed by repeated death and rebirth, his purpose defined solely by the next battle, the next enemy? "Enough," he finally replied, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken centuries. "More than enough." The tactical display flickered with the Hulk's massive outline, its dimensions defying easy comprehension. Somewhere in its depths lay the Iron Sentinel's final secret, and perhaps, if the Emperor still watched over his most wayward sons, answers to questions Kaney had not yet learned to ask. "Prepare boarding parties," he commanded, his voice cutting through the bridge's silence like a blade. "Whatever the Iron Sentinels died protecting, we will uncover it. The dead deserve that much." As his warriors moved to obey, Kaney remained fixed upon the display, watching the Hulk's slow rotation against the starfield. A new signal had begun transmitting, faint but persistent, originating from far beyond the Ghoul stars. Metallica was calling, its distress beacon cutting through the void like a cry for salvation or damnation. The choice, as always, would be his to make, and in making it, perhaps he would finally discover whether a man without a past could still forge a future worth the price of his immortal suffering. The armory of the penitent's blade stretched before them like a cathedral of forgotten wars, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into shadows that seemed to swallow the dim lumens whole. Here, where weapons hung in stark utility stripped of all heraldry, Captain Thaddeus Kane allowed himself the dangerous luxury of remembering. Each memory arrived like shrapnel, sharp, fragmentary, cutting deeper with each resurrection that pulled him back from the Emperor's side. The Bardab War. Even now, centuries after the last shots were fired, the name tasted of ash and betrayal on his tongue. He had been captain of the 10th Company then, proud sons of Dawn bearing the golden fist upon their shoulders with righteous conviction. The Iron Sentinels had answered the call to bring the astral claws to heel, believing in the righteousness of their cause and the unbreakable bonds of brotherhood that should have been their salvation. How naive they had been, how trusting. Kaney's gauntleted fingers traced the pommel of his nameless power sword, its blade reflecting the armory's shadows like captured starlight. During the siege of Badab Primaris, when the traitors made their final stand, Chapter Master Castor Vex had received intelligence of a gene seed repository hidden deep within the palace complex. Not corrupted seed, but pure samples from loyalist chapters, prizes beyond measure for any who would claim them. The memory came in fragments, his company holding a collapsing flank against overwhelming odds, expecting promised reinforcements that never arrived. Instead, a cold Vox transmission ordering withdrawal, while Vex's private frigate burned a silent trail away from the battle, its holds heavy with stolen gene seed. The 10th Company had held their ground and bled out as neatly as a ritual offering, abandoned by the very man they had sworn to follow unto death. You remember it differently each time, Brother Voss observed from the armory's entrance, his massive frame casting long shadows across the weapon racks. The former salamander's voice carried the distinctive rasp of a damaged Vox grill, each word weighted with understanding born of shared trauma. Voss knew betrayal intimately, though his had come from within. His chapter had fallen to corruption that seeped through their ranks like poison, noble hearts twisted by whispers from the warp. He had watched battle brothers succumb to promises of transcendence, their flesh warping as they turned sacred flamers upon the innocent. In the end, he had been forced to burn the very halls he had sworn to protect, becoming the sole survivor of a chapter that had once embodied compassion and justice. The last oath takes its price, Kaney replied, his voice carrying the weight of too many resurrections. Each death strips away pieces of who I was. Sometimes I wonder if the betrayal happened as I remember, or if my mind has simply created a narrative to justify what I've become. Sergeant Corrin emerged from the shadows with jerky, mechanical precision, his hatred of the flesh having driven him to replace more of his body than even Iron Hand traditions would normally permit. Servo skulls orbited his augmented frame like metallic angels of judgment, while bionic legs carried him across the deck with inhuman efficiency. His pursuit of mechanical perfection had led him down paths his chapter considered heretical, replacing organs and limbs not from necessity, but from philosophical revulsion toward anything organic. Memory is a luxury we can no longer afford, Corrin announced, his voice carrying mechanical precision. The flesh is weak, and memory weaker still. Only purpose endures. His fall had been perhaps the most tragic. Attempting to commune with forbidden machine spirits, seeking to integrate ancient, blasphemous knowledge directly into his consciousness. His chapter had stopped him just short of complete lobotomization, but the damage to his psyche proved irreversible. Apothecary Nal materialized from the deeper shadows like a spectre of judgment, moving with the fluid grace of Sanguinius's gene line, though something hollow haunted his movements. The former blood angel carried his narthecium like a censer of grief, its seals hissing prayers for the dead. His tragedy cut deepest of all, watching company after company succumb to the black rage, their noble hearts consumed by visions of their Primarch's death, until nothing remained but mindless fury. What purpose drives a son of Sanguinius who has watched his brothers fall to the floor? Kaney asked gently. I serve because the alternative is madness, Nal whispered. Every time I close my eyes, I see Sanguinius falling, feel Horus's claws tearing through angelic flesh. The last oath gives me purpose beyond the visions, beyond the rage that threatens to consume what little remains of my sanity. Here they stood, 4 warriors bound not by shared glory, but by mutual understanding of failure's bitter taste. The Iron Sentinel's former captain, betrayed by his chapter master, the salamander who had watched his brotherhood burn from within, the Iron Hand, whose pursuit of perfection had nearly destroyed his soul, the Blood Angel haunted by visions of primarchal death. Each had sought redemption in the Death Watch, only to discover that even among the Emperor's most elite, honor could prove as elusive as morning mist. They had traded one set of chains for another, the shackles of disgrace for the bonds of anonymous service. "The Hulk awaits our investigation," Caney said finally, breaking the silence that had settled over them like a funeral shroud. "Whatever secrets the Iron Sentinels died protecting, we will uncover them. Perhaps in their sacrifice, we might find what has long eluded us." But even as he spoke, Caney wondered if redemption was truly what they sought, or if they had simply become addicted to the cycle of death and resurrection that defined their existence. The last oath promised return from the grave, but it could never promise that what returned remained worthy of salvation. The Metallica signal pulsed stronger now, its distress beacon cutting through the void like a cry for deliverance or damnation. The choice, as always, would be theirs to make. Metallica rose from the void like a wounded god, its surface scarred by millennia of industrial devotion, and now bleeding fire into the star-drunk darkness. The Forge world's orbital crown writhed with the shapes of approaching nightmares, bio-ships of Hive Fleet Kraken that moved through the defense grid like living cancer, their chitinous hulls weeping acids that could dissolve adamantium. From the observation deck of the Penitent's Blade, Captain Thaddeus Kane watched defense platforms die in brilliant funeral pyres, their machine spirits screaming final prayers to the Omnissiah, as tyrannid weapon symbiotes tore them apart with methodical, terrifying hunger. The planet's atmosphere churned with the smoke of 1,000 foundries, but now alien spores drifted through that industrial haze, like the breath of some primordial fever dream. Macro cannons spoke in tongues of fire, stitching incandescent patterns across the swarm. Yet more bioforms poured from the gullets of greater organisms, descending like hungering rain upon the sacred manufactorums below. "Emergency transmission from the planetary surface," Brother Voss reported, his scarred features illuminated by the tactical display's crimson glow. "Adeptus Mechanicus protocols. They're requesting immediate assistance with research materials." Caney's enhanced physiology registered the familiar taste of forbidden knowledge, metallic, sharp, like blood on recycled air. In his centuries of service, he had learned that when tech priests spoke of research during a crisis, it usually meant they had been delving into mysteries that would make even the Inquisition pause. The Forge, world's distress beacon, had been broadcasting for weeks, yet no Imperial relief force had answered. That silence spoke volumes about what the Adeptus Mechanicus had been doing in Metallica's deep foundries. The Penitent's Blade descended through layers of toxic smog and burning debris, its void shields groaning under the relentless barrage of bioplasma. They made planetfall in a shattered manufactorum, its vast assembly lines now graveyards of Skitarii and the grotesque forms of Hormagaunts. The air tasted of ozone, burnt promethium, and something else, a faint metallic tang that was disturbingly familiar, like the aftertaste of resurrection. It was in the deepest sub-levels of the Forge world, beneath layers of adamantium and ancient wards, that they found him. Tech Dominus Xerath presided over a chamber that pulsed with arcane energies, his form a grotesque fusion of flesh and living metal that defied easy categorization. Mechadendrites writhed around his spider-like frame, each tipped with instruments that seemed to pulse with their own malevolent intelligence. He was surrounded by stasis coffins that hummed with unnatural light, and within them, Caney saw forms that were both human and utterly alien. Flesh interwoven with silver threads, organs replaced by intricate clockwork, eyes glowing with an unholy emerald luminescence. "You have come," Zerath intoned, his voice a multi-layered symphony of distorted vox static that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate within the bones themselves. The failed experiments returned to their source. The words struck Caney like a physical blow, but he forced his voice to remain steady. "Explain your meaning, Tech Dominus." Zerath's optical clusters fixed upon him with what might have been triumph. "Your last oath, Captain Caney. The ritual that binds you to your endless cycle of death and resurrection. Did you believe it was born of imperial saints and sacred sacrifice?" The tech priest gestured toward his experiments with a spindly, multi-jointed limb. "It is nothing more than corrupted data, stolen fragments of my preliminary research into Necron reanimation protocols. You and your Brotherhood are crude prototypes, imperfect echoes of true immortality." The revelation hit Caney harder than any bolt around. His entire existence, his endless struggle for redemption through countless deaths and resurrections, had been built upon stolen heresy. The last oath was not an ancient sacred rite, but a perversion, a bastardized echo of Xenos science filtered through human desperation. Each resurrection strips away fragments of memory because the ritual is incomplete. Zerath continued, his voice carrying the cold precision of absolute certainty. You trade pieces of your soul for structural continuity, becoming less human with each revival. You are not immortal warriors. You are slowly decaying experiments, your essence eroding with each cycle. Apothecary Null stepped forward, his voice hollow with horror. "The sacred mysteries, the Emperor's grace." "There is no grace," Zerath scoffed, the sound like grinding gears. "Only data. Only the elegant mathematics of consciousness transfer, which you have corrupted into this crude, uncontrolled sequence. You are not redeemed. You are merely delayed in your decay." Caney felt something fundamental crack within his enhanced heart. His sacrifices, his pain, the fractured memories that haunted his dreams, all of it reduced to scientific data, to the byproduct of a heretic's ambitions. The Tyranids raged above them, a clear and unambiguous enemy, but here in Metallica's depths, the true horror was far more insidious. How could he protect this forged world when his very existence was testament to its darkest secrets? How could he fight for redemption when redemption itself might be nothing more than elaborate self-deception built on foundations of heresy? The external war was a distraction. The true battle had always been within, and it had just begun. The sky above Metallica writhed like a wounded god, its industrial atmosphere choked with the spores of Hive Fleet, Kraken's bioships. Each alien vessel descended through the toxic clouds like a falling star made of hunger and malice, their chitinous hulls weeping acids that could dissolve adamantium. From the command bunker buried deep beneath the Forge World's primary manufactorum, Captain Thaddeus Kane watched tactical displays paint a picture of inevitable doom. Red icons marking Hormagaunt swarms overrunning defensive positions, while larger bioforms carved through adamantium bulkheads as if they were parchment. The air trembled with distant thunder of macro cannons and the shrieking death songs of weapon symbiotes. Emergency lumens cast everything in hellish crimson, while cascades of dust fell from the groaning ceiling as manufactorums collapsed above them. Tech Dominus Xerath's revelations about the last oath still echoed in Caney's mind like poison, but the immediate tactical situation demanded his attention. "Captain," Brother Voss reported, his voice strained beyond mere exhaustion. The former salamander's massive frame trembled almost imperceptibly, and Caney noticed how his battle brother's eyes had begun to take on a reddish tinge. Heat seeped from Voss in waves, condensation hissing off his armor as his skin took on a cracked obsidian sheen, with veins burning ember red beneath. The outer habs are overrun. Casualty reports indicate complete collapse of sectors 7 through 12. "Something's wrong," Voss whispered, flexing his hands and leaving scorched prints on his bolter's casing. "I can smell the oil, taste the meat in the air. The fire that never goes out. It's louder here." Sergeant Corrin stepped forward with jerky, mechanical precision, but his augmentations were clearly malfunctioning. His servo arms spasmed uncontrollably, mechadendrites lashing the air like agitated serpents. "Psychic emanations from the bioships are interfering with my neural interfaces," he reported, his voice carrying odd harmonic distortions. "The hive mind's influence is corrupting machine spirits across all cogitator pathways." One of his servo skulls shrieked in binary, lurched sideways, then pitched into a support pillar and exploded in a shower of porcelain and blood. Corrin staggered, catching himself against the wall with a sound like metal crying. Caney called up population density charts on the tactical display, studying the clusters of life signs that pulsed throughout Metallica's vast urban sprawl. But as he examined the data more closely, something fundamental shifted in his understanding. The biometric readings were too uniform, too regulated for standard civilian populations. "These aren't civilians," he realized, his enhanced vision passing details that would have escaped organic eyes. The neural activity patterns, they're artificial. Tech Dominus Zerath's mechanical laughter filled the bunker like grinding gears. 93.7% of Metallica's population consists of servitors, lobotomized humans whose souls were excised in the name of efficiency. They are biological machines, Captain, no more deserving of salvation than the cogitators that regulate our atmospheric processes. The revelation struck Caney like a physical blow. Those millions of life signs weren't people at all, but walking corpses animated by crude programming, their humanity surgically removed to serve the Adeptus Mechanicus's endless hunger for compliant labor. They felt no fear, experienced no suffering, possessed no dreams or hopes to lose. "Then what are we defending?" Voss snarled, his voice taking on the distinctive rasp of suppressed rage. "What purpose is there in dying for empty shells?" But even as he spoke, Caney realized the terrible parallel. If the servitors were humans stripped of their souls, what did that make him? Each resurrection had taken pieces of his memory, fragments of his identity, until sometimes he wondered if anything truly human remained. Was he simply one hollow shell defending others? "I am detecting massive psychic pressure," Corrin managed, though his voice now carried a distinctly mechanical quality, as his augmentations fought against the hive mind's influence. "My systems are compromised. Cannot maintain targeting locks." Caney weighed his options with cold calculation. Tactical withdrawal would preserve his brotherhood, but condemn whatever remained of Metallica's secrets to tyrannid consumption. Standing and fighting would likely result in their destruction. "There are ancient defense systems," Zerath offered, his optical clusters gleaming with malevolent light. "The Palladium Mantle, archaeotech weapons buried beneath the Forge world's crust. They could break the assault, but activation requires massive biological matter to fuel the weapon spirits. The servitor population would provide adequate raw materials," the Tech Dominus explained with clinical detachment. The choice crystallized before Caney with terrible clarity. He could activate weapons that would consume millions of lobotomized humans to save a world built on heretical research, or allow the Tyranids to devour everything. Either way, the innocent would pay for decisions made by those who claimed to serve the Emperor. But perhaps that was the truth he had been running from. Perhaps there were no innocent choices left in a galaxy consumed by endless war. His hand moved toward the activation rune. This is Thaddeus Caney. I authorize Palladium Mantle activation. Designate sanctified zones around critical research vaults only. All other grids to receive full purification. Apothecary Nal flinched. Thaddeus, better my sin than the galaxies, Caney said, his voice steady as ancient machine spirit stirred in Metallica's depths. The world took a breath. Then the iron began to sing. The Palladium Mantle's awakening sent shockwaves through Metallica's crust like the birth cry of a mechanical god. Ancient weapon spirits stirred in their adamantium wombs, fed by the biological matter of a million servitors whose empty souls had been deemed acceptable sacrifice. The Forge world's surface erupted in pillars of incandescent energy that carved through Tyranid bioships like scythes through wheat, their alien screams harmonizing with the death song of burning chitin and boiling ichor. But something else stirred in the deep places beneath Metallica's foundations, something that had been sleeping for 60 million years in crypts older than human civilization. Captain Thaddeus Caney felt it first as a tremor in his enhanced bones, a resonance that seemed to call to the metallic components threaded through his resurrected flesh. The very air grew thick with an alien presence that made his augmented heart skip in recognition he could not name. The bunker's walls began to phase and shift, living metal seeping through adamantium like mercury through cloth. Geometric patterns formed that hurt to perceive directly, while frost crystallized on their weapons despite the Forge world's industrial heat. Brother Voss stepped back, his flamer's pilot light flickering as his skin took on an obsidian sheen, ember veins pulsing beneath the surface with increasing intensity. Something is interfacing with my systems, Sergeant Corrin managed through gritted teeth, his augmentations lashing uncontrollably as foreign signals flooded his neural pathways. Alien code patterns, but familiar somehow, as if my augmentations recognized the source. The first Necron warrior materialized through the bunker's floor, like Silver Death achieving corporeal form. Its skeletal frame gleamed with impossible perfection, every joint and servo a masterwork of engineering that made Imperial technology seem crude by comparison. Green fire burned in empty eye sockets as more warriors phased through the walls with fluid precision. There, Gorse weapons tracking the Space Marines with mechanical inevitability. The overlord that emerged commanded immediate attention, taller, more ornate, radiating an aura of ancient, terrible authority. When it spoke, its voice bypassed their vox systems entirely, resonating directly within their minds like the whisper of dying stars. Greetings, primitives. Your crude resurrection rituals have been most illuminating. Tech Dominus Zerath's optical clusters blazed with what might have been triumph. Overlord Amotech the Deathless, the data exchanges have been most profitable, as promised. Understanding crashed over Caney like a tide of ice water. You've been feeding them information. Each resurrection, each death. You've been selling our suffering. Improving it, Amotech corrected, with something resembling amusement. Your last oath incorporates stolen fragments of our biotransference protocols, filtered through such primitive understanding that the results are educational. You trade organic components for metallic analogues without comprehending the transformation's true scope. Apothecary Nal stepped forward, His Narthesium sensors focused on Kaney's vital signs with growing horror. "Captain, I've been monitoring your physiological changes since our first resurrection cycle. Each death has introduced new metallic elements into your cellular structure. Your blood now contains synthetic components, your bones are reinforced with living metal analogues, and your nervous system shows increasing integration with artificial neural pathways." The revelation struck like a physical blow. Kaney raised his gauntleted hands, studying them with new understanding. The metallic taste after each resurrection, the subtle harmonics he sometimes felt resonating in his chest. Not side effects, but symptoms of systematic replacement. "The transformation is inevitable," Amotech continued with mathematical certainty. "With each death and resurrection, you become more like us, immortal, perfect, freed from the weaknesses of organic existence. Soon, the process will be complete, whether you will it or not." "What do you want?" Kaney demanded, though he feared the answer. "Service. You exist in a hybrid state between flesh and metal, making you ideal intermediaries between our species. Serve willingly, and we will complete your transformation. Grant you true immortality, perfect bodies that will never decay, never fail, never disappoint. Your brothers' suffering will end. Their genetic curses, their augmented torments, all can be resolved through perfect unity with the machine. The offer hung in the recycled air like a poisoned chalice. Perfect immortality without the constant agony of resurrection. Existence freed from the tyranny of organic limitations and the slow erosion of memory and identity. All they had to do was surrender what remained of their humanity." Kaney looked at his warriors. Voss, whose skin now glowed with barely contained fire. Corin, whose augmentations sparked beyond his control. Nal, whose eyes reflected the weight of watching too many brothers fall to genetic madness. Broken souls who had followed him through exile and shame, bound together by mutual understanding of failure's bitter taste. "Your offer is heard," Kaney said finally, his voice carrying harmonics that sounded increasingly unfamiliar to his own ears. "But the choice remains mine to make." Amotech's skull tilted with what might have been approval. "Indeed. But choose swiftly, Captain. The transformation proceeds whether you embrace it or resist. The only question is whether you will face eternity as master or slave." The Necrons held their positions with mechanical patience, waiting for an answer that would determine not just their fate, but the nature of what they would become. The Imperial frigate Vindication's edge descended through Metallica's burning atmosphere like judgment-given form, its hull scarred by warp translation and painted with the stark heraldry of the Inquisition. The vessel carved a precise path through the Tyrannid swarm, its lance batteries speaking in tongues of consecrated fire while void shields blazed under alien bioplasma. Even the ravenous creatures of High Fleet Krakens seemed to recoil from something that tasted of absolute authority, their bioships curling away like fingers withdrawing from flame. Captain Thaddeus Kane watched the approach from Metallica's primary strategium, his enhanced vision tracking the frigate's descent with growing certainty that his past had finally caught up with him. The ship's distinctive silhouette was burned into his memory from countless Deathwatch operations. Inquisitor Vaylin Thorn had come to Metallica, and with her arrival, the last threads of his old life began to unravel like ancient parchment exposed to flame. The reunion took place in the Forge World's command center, beneath Gothic arches that groaned under the weight of a dying world. Emergency lumens cast everything in hellish crimson, while the distant thunder of macro cannons provided a percussion of desperation. When Thorn entered, flanked by her stormtrooper retinue and a silent figure whose presence seemed to deaden the very air around her. Caney felt the familiar chill of imperial judgment. She had aged since their last meeting 7 years ago, though whether from the passage of time or the weight of terrible knowledge, he could not say. Silver now streaked her once golden hair, and her eyes held depths that spoke of choices no human should be forced to make. Her inquisitorial rosette caught the emergency lighting like captured starlight, while her carapace bore the scars of a dozen campaigns fought in the Emperor's name. "Thaddeus," she said, her voice carrying the authority of the Golden Throne itself. "It has been too long, though I confess I had hoped our next meeting would not be under such heretical circumstances." "Vaylin." He inclined his head with careful respect, though every instinct screamed warnings about her presence here. "Your timing is fortuitous." "Is it?" Her gaze swept over his warriors with the precision of a surgeon appraising failing organs. Voss, whose skin still glowed with barely contained fire. Corin, whose augmentations sparked with alien interference. Nal, whose hollow eyes reflected too many resurrections. "I have been tracking your Brotherhood's activities across 3 sectors, following a trail of anomalous resurrection events and Xenos contamination." The words struck like bolter rounds. Caney felt his enhanced heart skip as understanding crashed over him. "Tracking us." Thorn activated a holo projector, filling the air between them with star charts marked by crimson icons, worlds where the Black Shields had operated, battles they had fought, enemies they had faced. But the pattern that emerged was not one of heroic service, but something far more troubling. "Every world you have touched has experienced impossible resurrection phenomena," she explained with clinical precision. "Guardsmen returning from confirmed deaths, civilians surviving injuries that should have been fatal, even servitors displaying regenerative capabilities beyond their programming. Your presence spreads the contagion of your heretical resurrection technology like a plague." In his mind, Amatek's voice stirred with metallic amusement. "She speaks truth, little soldier. Your crude ritual bleeds corruption wherever you tread, yet she offers only death, while I offer perfection." Caney forced the alien whispers aside, focusing on the woman who had once been his closest ally. "We have served the Imperium faithfully. Have you?" Thorn's interruption cut like a blade. "I carry sealed orders from the Ordo Hereticus, Thaddeus. Metallica is to be subjected to exterminatus within 24 hours. The Forge World's research into Xenos resurrection technology represents an unacceptable threat to Imperial doctrine." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant screams of dying Tyranids and the mechanical hymns of failing machinery. Behind Thorn, her retinue waited with the patience of those who had witnessed too many such confrontations, while the silent figure, a blank, Caney realized, stood like a void in human form. "You cannot seriously intend to destroy an entire Forge world," Caney protested, though he already knew the answer in her steel-grey eyes. "I intend to do my duty," Thorn replied, with the finality of the grave, "as I hope you will do yours. Surrender your brotherhood for purification, Thaddeus. Submit to the Emperor's mercy, and perhaps some portion of your souls can still be saved." The chronometer on the Strategium wall began its inexorable countdown, each second bringing them closer to a choice that would define not just their fate, but the nature of what they had become. Voss's heat dimmed, as if banked for judgment, while Corin's augmentations sparked with increasing interference from the Necron presence below. "You know what we have become," Caney said finally, his voice carrying the weight of countless resurrections. Each death strips away pieces of what we were. How can you ask us to surrender when we have given everything in service to the throne? Because service without purity is corruption, Thorn answered, though he caught a flicker of pain in her eyes. Because the road to damnation is paved with good intentions, and because someone must make the hard choices that preserve the Imperium's soul. 24 hours, Amotek whispered in his mind, the words carrying harmonics that resonated with the living metal now threaded through his bones. A fleeting moment to choose between her oblivion and our eternity. Which path truly serves your purpose, Captain? Caney looked at his warriors, broken souls who had followed him through exile and shame, bound together by mutual understanding of failure's bitter taste. To surrender them to the Inquisition's tender mercies was unthinkable. Yet to defy the Imperium he had sworn to serve would make him the very traitor his enemies claimed him to be. 24 hours, Thorn said, drawing a chrono from her robes. Prove your loyalty, Thaddeus. Show me that the man I once called my last loyalist still exists beneath all that living metal. Time was running out for them all. The warp rift tore reality like a wound across God's flesh, spilling crimson fire and the screams of the damned into Metallica's tortured sky. From its bleeding maw emerged a vessel that defied both sanity and imperial doctrine. The harbinger of ruin, once the proud flagship of the Iron Sentinels chapter, now transformed into a cathedral of brass and bone that reeked of spilled blood and broken oaths. Its hull writhed with chaos runes that hurt to perceive directly, while demon faces leered from every surface, their mouths frozen in eternal screams of hunger and malice. Captain Thaddeus Kane felt the ship's arrival like a knife twisting in his enhanced heart, each beat echoing with the weight of sins he had tried to bury beneath countless resurrections. The vessel's distinctive silhouette was burned into his memory, not as it appeared now, corrupted and blasphemous, but as it had been during the Badab War, when honor still meant something and brotherhood was more than hollow words spoken over cooling corpses. The Vox channels filled with a voice that haunted Caney's nightmares, deeper now and distorted by centuries of chaos worship, but unmistakably familiar. My dear Thaddeus, the voice purred with obscene affection, each word dripping with the honey of false camaraderie. Still playing at redemption, I see. Still pretending that honor matters in a galaxy that devours the righteous and elevates the pragmatic. Castor Vex, once chapter master of the Iron Sentinels, now something far worse than mere traitor. A Chaos Lord bearing the brass, marks of Khorne, come to claim what he believed was rightfully his. Drop pods screamed through the atmosphere like falling stars made of malice, each one bearing warriors who had once been Caney's battle brothers. Their ceramite had been reforged into something resembling flayed skin, while their helms leaked the blood of sacrificed innocents. These were the survivors of Badab, twisted by centuries of the blood god's tender mercies into weapons of pure hatred. He comes for you, Inquisitor Thorn observed, her hand resting on her bolt pistol's grip. Your former chapter master seeks to complete what he began during the Badab War. The memories crashed over Caney like a tide of ice water, no longer the fractured fragments that usually survived his resurrections, but crystal clear recollections that cut like razors. The siege of Badab Primaris, his company holding a collapsing flank, while expecting reinforcements that never came. Vex's cold transmission ordering withdrawal, while his private frigate burned away from the battle, its holds heavy with stolen gene seed that would serve as payment to dark powers promising ascension beyond mortal limitations. But the immediate threat came not from Vex's approaching forces, but from within their own ranks. Brother Voss staggered, his skin now glowing like molten obsidian while ember veins pulsed beneath the surface with increasing violence. The genetic curse of his lost chapter, dormant for so long under the weight of shame and duty, finally claimed its due under the psychic pressure radiating from the Chaos warship. "The fire," Voss gasped, his voice carrying harmonics that spoke of barely contained madness. "It burns so bright here." The voices of the dead, they're screaming about betrayal, about brothers who turned their flamers on the innocent. The transformation accelerated beyond control. Voss's armor began to crack as his frame expanded, muscles swelling beyond transhuman proportions, while his eyes blazed with inner fire that had nothing to do with nobility or justice. This was the rage that had consumed his chapter, the genetic instability that had driven noble hearts to madness and made them weapons against those they had sworn to protect. "Voss," Caney called, but his battle brother was already lost to the furnace consuming him from within. The former salamander turned on his companions with a roar that shattered the observation dome's armored glass, his hands wreathed in flames that burned cold and hungry. This was no longer Brother Voss, but something twisted by grief and genetic curse into a weapon of pure destruction, his flamer speaking in tongues of superheated death. Caney drew his power sword, its blade humming with contained energy, and felt his enhanced hearts break with the weight of necessary duty. The duel was brief but savage. Voss fought with the strength of madness and the skill of centuries, but Caney had been forged in the crucible of countless deaths and resurrections. His blade found its mark, piercing the furnace of his battle brother's heart and ending the torment with a mercy that tasted like ash. As Voss died in his arms, his eyes clearing for one final moment of recognition, Caney heard Castor Vex's laughter echoing through the Vox channels. "Do you see, my faithful captain?" Vex's voice carried the weight of terrible truth. "This is what loyalty brings, the duty to kill those you love, to make the hard choices that preserve the greater good. You are already mine, Thaddeus. You simply lack the honesty to admit it." The words cut deeper than any blade because they carried the weight of recognition. Caney looked down at Voss's cooling corpse, then at his remaining warriors, broken souls who had followed him through exile and shame. His quest for redemption had never been about absolution, he realized with crushing clarity. It had always been elaborate self-punishment, a way to keep moving so he never had to stand still and face the shape of his own complicity. In his mind, Amotech's whispers stirred with metallic approval, while Thorn's ultimatum ticked away like a blade waiting to fall. Time was running out, and the sins of the father had finally come home to roost. The command bunker's emergency lumens cast Brother Voss's cooling corpse in hellish crimson. His armor cracked like black glass, where the genetic fire had finally consumed him. Captain Thaddeus Caney stood over his fallen brother, the weight of necessary mercy crushing his enhanced hearts, while the distant thunder of Metallica's death song provided percussion to their grief. Tech Dominus Xerath waited in the chamber's depths like a spider in its web, surrounded by stasis coffins that hummed with unnatural energies and banks of cogitators that pulsed with data streams too complex for human comprehension. "At last," Xerath intoned, his mechanical voice harmonizing across Vox static and wet human whisper. The prototype returns to witness the culmination of his purpose. Caney felt the familiar chill of revelation approaching, like the moment before a blade finds its mark. What purpose? Xerath gestured with spindly mechadendrites, and the chamber responded with cascading hollow displays that painted the air in geometric patterns of light and shadow. Your last oath is not an ancient rite, Captain. It is my masterwork, a resurrection protocol that synthesizes 3 distinct technologies into perfect harmony. Imperial gene seed manipulation provides the biological foundation. Necron biotransference ensures structural integrity, while chaos soul-binding techniques grant the flexibility to transcend conventional limitations. The words struck like bolter rounds, each revelation shattering another pillar of Kaney's identity. His entire existence, his endless quest for redemption through death and resurrection, had been nothing more than an elaborate experiment. Each death provided invaluable data, Zerath continued with clinical satisfaction. Each revival allowed me to introduce subtle modifications to your neural architecture. The emotional trauma of your memories ensures psychological compliance, while the shame drives you toward the specific form of self-sacrifice my research requires. Apothecary Null stepped forward, his Narthesium sensors confirming the terrible truth displayed on Zerath's screens. The betrayal at Badab. Carefully crafted implants. Zerath interrupted. Your recollections of abandonment by Chapter Master Vex, the stolen gene seed, the brothers left to die. All artificial constructs designed to ensure your compliance with experimental parameters. The emotional weight provides necessary motivation for repeated self-sacrifice, while preventing you from seeking outside validation that might expose the deception. The revelation hit Kaney harder than any weapon. If his memories were artificial, then what was he? Had Thaddeus Kaney ever truly existed? Or was he simply a construct built from stolen data and manufactured trauma? You lie, Nal whispered, but his own instruments betrayed the desperate hope in his voice. The neural patterns matched perfectly. I simply accelerated your nature, Zerath replied with something resembling pity. Some men require manufactured cliffs to begin their fall toward enlightenment. Sergeant Corrin stepped forward, his augmentations sparking with rage and betrayal. The former Iron Hand's hatred of flesh had driven him to replace more of his body than even his chapter's traditions would normally permit, seeking purity through mechanical perfection. Heretic, he snarled, raising his plasma pistol towards Zerath's spider-like form. Your blasphemies end here. But as he squeezed the trigger, his own augmentations betrayed him. The weapon's machine spirit seized control of his neural pathways, sending feedback loops through his enhanced nervous system that left him convulsing on the deck. His servo arms turned against him, pinning his limbs while his own cogitators spoke in binary that translated to abject surrender. Did you believe your modifications were truly your own? Zerath asked with mechanical amusement. Every replacement organ, every enhancement you have received since joining the Black Shields has been slave to my will. You are not warriors. You are test subjects, and your augmentations ensure absolute compliance when necessary. The Brotherhood's faith cracked like ice under pressure. Kaney watched his remaining warriors, Corrin writhing helplessly as his own body betrayed him. Nal staring at his instruments with growing horror as he realized how thoroughly they had been compromised. Everything they had believed about their purpose, their sacrifice, their quest for redemption, all of it reduced to experimental data. In the growing silence, Overlord Amotek's voice resonated through the chamber with metallic authority. Now you begin to understand the scope of your deception, little soldiers. This flesh creature has used you as crude instruments while I have observed and learned from your suffering. The Necron Overlord's skeletal form materialized more fully, living metal gleaming with impossible perfection. But I offer truth where he provides only lies. Serve me willingly, and I will restore your authentic memories, show you who you truly were before this heretic's manipulations began. Your real names, your actual histories, the genuine bonds of brotherhood that once defined you. The offer hung in the recycled air like a poisoned chalice. Perfect knowledge of their true selves, authentic memories unmarred by artificial trauma. All they had to do was surrender what remained of their humanity to an alien intelligence that viewed flesh as limitation. Caney looked at his broken warriors, then at the banks of cogitators that had recorded their every moment of pain. Somewhere in those data streams lay truth, but he was no longer certain which option represented salvation and which damnation. The choice, as always, would be his to make. The Forge World's depths erupted into chaos as Inquisitor Velin Thorn's stormtroopers breached the command bunker's outer defenses, their carapace armor gleaming with consecrated oils, while hellguns spoke in tongues of purifying fire. Emergency klaxons wailed like dying angels as Tech Dominus Xerath's servitor guards responded with mechanical precision, their augmetic limbs crackling with las cutters and industrial plasma torches repurposed for war. Above them, Hive Fleet Kraken's bioships continued their relentless assault on Metallica's surface, the tyrannid hive mind pressing against every consciousness like a tide of alien hunger seeking purchase in minds already fractured by revelation and betrayal. Captain Thaddeus Caney stood at the epicenter of converging catastrophes, his power sword humming with contained energy while the weight of impossible choices pressed down upon his enhanced shoulders. The battle raged on multiple levels simultaneously. Physical combat filled the bunker as stormtroopers engaged servitor guards. Psychic pressure from the hive mind above threatened to overwhelm them all, and beneath it lay the philosophical struggle for the nature of loyalty itself in a galaxy where truth had become another weapon. Thaddeus. Thorn's voice cut through the battle's chaos as she advanced through the smoke, her power sword wreathed in disruptor fields. Stand down. Your corruption ends here. But even as she spoke, Caney could see the doubt in her steel-grey eyes, the recognition that the man she had once called her last loyalist might already be lost beyond redemption. Her blank operative stood like a void in human form, his presence deadening the psychic emanations, while stormtroopers established firing positions with practiced efficiency. Choose quickly, little soldier. Overlord Amotek's voice resonated through the chamber with metallic authority. The fleshwoman offers only death, while I provide perfect understanding. Your authentic memories await, the truth of who you were before this heretic's manipulations began. Sergeant Corrin writhed on the deck, his own augmentations turned against him by Xerath's override protocols. Captain, he managed through gritted teeth, his voice carrying mechanical distortions as foreign code flooded his neural pathways. My systems, compromised, cannot distinguish friend from foe. Apothecary Nal moved through the chaos with desperate purpose, his narthecium scanning the data streams that flowed between Xerath's cogitators. Thaddeus, he called over the sound of hellgun fire. The resurrection protocols. I can access the source code, but it will require direct neural interface. The implication was clear. Direct connection to Xerath's heretical research would expose Nal's mind to corruption beyond imagining, but it might also reveal the truth about their manufactured existence. Do it, Caney commanded, his voice carrying the authority of centuries spent making impossible choices. Nal pressed his palm against the primary cogitator's interface port, and his enhanced physiology convulsed as alien data flooded his consciousness. Blood streamed from his eyes as he fought to process information human minds were never meant to comprehend, his gene seed's legacy providing just enough resilience to maintain coherence as the truth unfolded before him. The last oath, he gasped, his voice carrying harmonics of wonder and horror. It was never about redemption, never about bringing us back from the Emperor's side. Project Cenotaph. That's its true designation. A weapon designed to create perfect soldiers who cannot truly die, cannot question their purpose, cannot refuse any order no matter how terrible. The revelation struck like a physical blow. Their entire quest for redemption had been nothing more than programming. Their shame and self-sacrifice carefully calibrated to produce the ideal weapon. Warriors who would endure any suffering, accept any mission, sacrifice any principle in pursuit of manufactured absolution. The emotional trauma ensures compliance, Nal continued, his enhanced physiology beginning to shut down under the strain of processing heretical knowledge. The artificial memories provide motivation. The resurrections strip away inconvenient moral limitations while preserving tactical effectiveness. We are not warriors seeking redemption. We are weapons pretending to be human. Thorn's stormtroopers pressed their assault, but Zerath's defenses adapted with mechanical precision. Servo skulls descended from the ceiling like metallic angels of judgment, their weapon mounts tracking targets with inhuman accuracy, while the Tech Dominus orchestrated the battle with clinical detachment from behind layers of conversion fields. Choose, Amatek repeated, his skeletal form growing more solid as reality bent around his presence. Truth or comfortable lies, authentic existence or manufactured purpose, eternity or extinction. Nal's body spasmed as he drove deeper into the data core, pulling fragments of authentic code from Zerath's corrupted systems. The key, he whispered, blood frothing at his lips. I can give you the key to break free from the programming, but the price... His enhanced physiology failed catastrophically as the heretical knowledge overwhelmed his neural pathways. But in his final moments, he managed to transmit the core authentication codes directly to Kaney's consciousness, the means to either embrace or destroy what they had become. Kaney caught his dying brother, feeling the weight of another sacrifice made in his name. Around them, the battle intensified as Thorn's forces closed the final distance, while Necron warriors phased through the walls with patient inevitability. The choice crystallized before him with terrible clarity. Stand with the Imperium and destroy everything he had become, or embrace the alien offer and preserve his brotherhood at the cost of their humanity. Either way, the price of truth would be measured in souls. Time was running out for them all. The Forge World's core chamber transformed into something beyond human comprehension as Overlord Amotek the Deathless shed the last vestiges of concealment, his skeletal form expanding into terrible majesty that dwarfed even the towering Gothic architecture. Living metal flowed like quicksilver made manifest, reshaping itself into configurations that hurt mortal minds to perceive directly, while ancient hieroglyphs blazed across his frame with emerald fire that contained knowledge older than Terra's first dawn. The very air grew thick with the weight of 60 million years, reality bending around his presence until the chamber's walls phased and shifted, Gothic stonework giving way to geometric patterns that followed mathematical principles beyond human understanding. Captain Thaddeus Kaney stood transfixed as the Necron Overlord's true nature revealed itself. Not merely a warrior king, but something approaching godhood made manifest in crystallized will and incorruptible form. Emergency lumens flickered and died, replaced by cold radiance that emanated from Amotek's being like captured starlight, while whispers in languages older than human civilization spoke of dominion over the fundamental forces of existence itself. "Behold the truth of immortality," Amotek intoned. his voice bypassing auditory perception entirely to resonate within bone and sinew, each word carrying the authority of cosmic law. Not the crude resurrection rituals that tear fragments from your soul with each revival, but perfect continuity of consciousness transferred to incorruptible form. From the depths of his being, the Overlord produced an artifact that defied easy description. A crown wrought from living metal that pulsed with its own internal light, its surface inscribed with hieroglyphs that seemed to move when observed directly. The lattice of quicksilver lines writhed like mercury and sang like wire under winter wind, while the very air around it hummed with potential energy that spoke of dominion over death itself. "This is my offer, Captain Caney," Amotech continued, extending the crown with gestures that carried the weight of stellar authority. Dominion over the cycle of death and resurrection that has defined your tormented existence. No more pain at each awakening. No more fractured memories slipping like sand through your consciousness. No more watching your brothers fall to genetic curses and manufactured trauma. Perfect immortality, and with it, the power to grant the same transcendence to those you deem worthy. The temptation crashed over Caney like a tide of molten gold, overwhelming in its scope and terrible in its simplicity. An end to the constant agony of resurrection, to the slow erosion of memory and identity that had plagued him for centuries. His warriors could be freed from their genetic curses, Voss's fire madness that had finally consumed him, Corrin's mechanical obsessions that now held him prisoner, Naal's visions of primarchal death that had driven him to fatal sacrifice, all of it swept away by perfect unity with the machine. But even as the crown's hypnotic radiance called to him, the moment of cosmic revelation shattered under the weight of converging apocalypses. The void above Metallica tore like wounded flesh as Castor Vex's Chaos Fleet burst through the orbital defenses, drop pods screaming earthward, while demon engines shrieked hymns of hatred and brass. The former chapter master's voice filled every Vox channel with obscene laughter, distorted by centuries of Khorne's worship, but unmistakably familiar. "My faithful captain." Vex's transmission carried across all frequencies, each word dripping with false affection. Still playing at redemption when damnation offers such honest satisfaction. "The blood god has shown me truth. There is no honor in service, only strength in taking what you desire by force." Simultaneously, Inquisitor Thorn's frigate assumed bombardment position high above the dying Forge world, its lance batteries charging with the cold light of absolute judgment. Her voice cut through the chaos with inquisitorial authority that brooked no argument. "This is Inquisitor Valen Thorn. Exterminatus authorization confirmed. All Imperial personnel have 60 seconds to achieve minimum safe distance before cyclonic torpedo deployment." The countdown began its inexorable march toward annihilation, each passing second bringing them closer to extinction as the Tyrannid assault reached its terrifying crescendo. Bioships of Hive Fleet Kraken pressed through Metallica's failing defenses like living cancer, their weapon symbiotes carving through adamantium as if it were parchment, while the hive mind's psychic pressure threatened to overwhelm every consciousness on the dying world. But as Caney stared into the crown's mesmerizing depths, his gaze drifted to the Necron warriors that flanked their overlord with mechanical precision. Their skeletal forms moved with perfect calculation, each gesture utterly without spontaneity or genuine purpose. In their empty eye sockets, emerald fires burned with cold intelligence, but behind that light lay nothing, no growth, no change, no spark that separated existence from mere function. They were not immortal. They were undead, animated by programming and ancient imperatives, but lacking everything that made consciousness meaningful. Their perfection was indistinguishable from death, their eternity a prison of endless repetition, without the possibility of genuine choice or authentic experience. You were always meant to be my heralds in the galaxy of flesh, Amotech explained, with something resembling paternal pride, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated with the living metal now threaded through Kaney's enhanced physiology. The Black Shields, warriors without allegiance to any single chapter or cause, perfectly positioned to serve as intermediaries between species. Your resurrection technology was merely the first step. Crude though it may be, it demonstrated your willingness to transcend organic limitations. Sergeant Corrin writhed on the chamber floor, his own augmentations turned against him by Zerath's override protocols, mechanical limbs binding him in a prison of his own enhanced flesh. "Captain," he managed through gritted teeth, his voice carrying digital distortions as foreign code flooded his neural pathways. "My systems are compromised, but I can still choose to resist." In that moment of defiant humanity, Corrin fought his own augmentations for a fraction of a heartbeat and won it, nodding once in acknowledgement of his captain's leadership. A tiny human victory achieved through pure force of will against overwhelming mechanical control. Kaney felt the weight of Apothecary Null's final sacrifice, the authentication codes burning in his consciousness like brands of forbidden knowledge. The means to break free from Zerath's programming, to choose authentic existence over manufactured purpose, lay within his grasp. But the price would be measured in souls, and the choice would define not just their fate, but the very nature of what they would become. The crown pulsed with hypnotic radiance, promising an end to all suffering, all doubt, all the terrible weight of choice that had defined his existence. Perfect immortality waited, and with it, the power to reshape reality according to his will. But in the empty eye sockets of Amotech's warriors, he saw the ultimate truth of that promise. Existence without meaning, immortality without purpose, perfection that was indistinguishable from the most profound death imaginable. 3 apocalypses converged upon Metallica as the countdown reached its final moments, each demanding a different form of surrender. Kaney looked at the crown, then at his broken brotherhood, then at the cosmos burning around them. The choice crystallized before him with terrible clarity, and Captain Thaddeus Kaney stepped forward to meet his destiny. The crown of living metal pulsed with hypnotic radiance, its surface inscribed with hieroglyphs that promised dominion over death itself, while around them 3 apocalypses converged upon Metallica with the inevitability of stellar collapse. Captain Thaddeus Kaney stared into its depths and felt the weight of 60 million years pressing against his consciousness like a tide of molten gold. The temptation was overwhelming, an end to the constant agony of resurrection, to the slow erosion of memory and identity that had plagued him for centuries. Yet in the empty eye sockets of Amotech's warriors, he saw the ultimate truth of that promise: existence without growth, immortality without purpose, perfection that was indistinguishable from the most profound death imaginable. "No," Kaney said, his voice carrying the authority of centuries spent learning the true weight of choice. He stepped back from the proffered crown, watching as living metal sighed like a disappointed sea. "I reject your offer, Amotech. I reject chaos corruption that promises strength through abandoning principle. I reject Necron perfection that offers existence without meaning. I choose humanity, flawed, mortal, finite, and infinitely precious because of those very limitations." Overlord Armotek's skeletal features shifted into what might have been surprise. Emerald fires blazing brighter in empty eye sockets. You would choose suffering over transcendence, death over eternity, the crude cycle of resurrection that strips away pieces of your soul with each revival. I choose the right to fail, Caney replied, drawing upon Apothecary Null's final sacrifice as the authentication codes burned through his consciousness like brands of forbidden knowledge. The right to grow, to change, to become something other than what I was programmed to be. We are not weapons pretending to be human. We are humans who chose to be better weapons than this galaxy deserves. He moved to Zerath's primary cogitator, his power sword humming with contained energy as he prepared to turn the last oath against its creator. But instead of destroying the heretical technology, he began to speak the ritual backward, syllables rearranged like bones in a reliquary, the resurrection rite becoming a binding snare. The authentication codes Null had died to retrieve flowed through his enhanced consciousness, revealing the true architecture of the protocols. Not merely resurrection technology, but a consciousness transfer system that could work in reverse. "What are you doing?" Zerath shrieked, his mechanical form writhing in alarm as the chamber's machine spirits responded to Caney's inverted commands. "Creating a tomb," Caney answered, feeling his enhanced physiology begin to convulse as he initiated the modified protocol. "My flesh will be your prison, Overlord. My mortality will be your chains." The binding took hold with the force of a collapsing star. Tendrils of emerald energy lashed out from the cogitator's interface ports, seeking to ensnare Armotek's consciousness and drag it into mortal flesh. The Necron Overlord fought back with the accumulated power of epochs, his will pressing against Caney's like an ocean seeking to fill a cup. But the Space Marine held fast, wrapping his dying consciousness around the alien intelligence like chains forged from pure determination. Around them, the Forge World's death throes reached their crescendo. Castor Vex's Chaos forces breached the chamber's outer defenses, their ceramite reforged into something resembling flayed skin, while demon engines shrieked hymns of hatred and brass. Drop pods crashed through the ceiling like falling stars made of malice, disgorging berserkers whose chain axes sang paeans to the blood god's eternal thirst. "Hold the line," Caney commanded through gritted teeth, his voice now carrying dual harmonics as Armotek's consciousness fought for control within his skull. Blood streamed from his eyes as organic systems battled against alien intelligence seeking to overwhelm them, while living metal began to spread through his circulatory system like quicksilver poison. Sergeant Corrin felt the change as Zerath's override protocol shattered under the surge of raw energy from Caney's interface. His augmentations, freed from foreign control for the first time in decades, responded to his commands with mechanical precision. He turned his plasma pistol on the nearest Chaos cultists, each shot a prayer of defiance spoken in superheated death. "For the Brotherhood," Corrin bellowed, his voice carrying mechanical harmonics that somehow sounded more human than they ever had before. "For those who chose to remember what we were." The handful of surviving Black Shields formed a defensive perimeter around their dying captain, their weapons speaking in unison against enemies that approached from every direction. These were no longer the manufactured warriors Zerath had sought to create, but something far more dangerous. Human beings who had chosen their own purpose despite every attempt to program their compliance. Above them, Inquisitor Thorn's countdown reached its final moments. Exterminatus deployment in 30 seconds. Her voice cut through the chaos with the finality of judgment itself, while cyclonic torpedoes prepared to cleanse Metallica from existence with the fire of dying stars. But the true battle raged within Kaney's failing consciousness. Amotek's vast intelligence pressed against his mortal limitations like winter across a field of graves, threatening to shatter his sanity with the weight of cosmic knowledge. The Overlord's will descended in waves of alien mathematics, each calculation designed to reduce human consciousness to mere data points. "You cannot contain me forever, little soldier." Amotek's voice resonated through his thoughts with metallic authority. "Your flesh will fail, your mind will break, and I will emerge from this crude prison stronger than before." "Perhaps," Kaney admitted, feeling his enhanced heart skip as organic systems began to shut down under the impossible strain. "But not today. Not while my brothers still draw breath. Not while there are choices left to make." He spoke the names of his fallen. Voss, consumed by genetic fire. Nal, sacrificed to give them truth. The nameless warriors who had followed him through exile and shame. Each syllable cost him breath he would not get back, but every word became another link in the chains that bound an immortal god to mortal flesh. The binding deepened, Kaney's consciousness wrapping around Amotek's like a reliquary around sacred bone. His vision narrowed to a green point, then fractured into hieroglyphs that spoke of dominion and death, but he held fast to the one truth that mattered. True immortality lay not in preserving the self, but in the legacy one left behind. "This is not about us," Kaney whispered across Vox and whatever lay beneath Vox, his words reaching Corrin through the chaos of battle. "Tell them to remember the names even if they're wrong. Tell them we chose to be human when it would have been easier to be gods." Corrin heard his captain's final order and understood. They would hold this line not because they were programmed to do so, but because they chose to. They would preserve what remained of humanity's hope not through perfect resurrection or mechanical transcendence, but through the simple act of standing against the darkness, even when standing meant falling. The exterminator's torpedoes struck Metallica's surface with the force of dying stars, but in the depths of the Forge world, Captain Thaddeus Kane completed his transformation from weapon to tomb, binding an immortal tyrant within mortal flesh through nothing more than the stubborn refusal to surrender what made him human. The last stand had begun, and it would echo through eternity. The cyclonic torpedoes struck Metallica's surface with the fury of dying stars, their plasma cores igniting atmospheric layers in cascades of superheated death that turned the Forge world's industrial sky into a cathedral of flame. Ash fell like black snow through the fractured vaults of the deep places, where emergency lumens flickered and died as power conduits overloaded under forces that could crack continents. In the command bunker far below, only the cold radiance emanating from Captain Kane's failing form provided illumination as he wrestled with an immortal consciousness that sought to tear his soul apart from within. Tech Dominus Xerath watched the destruction above with something approaching panic, his spider-like form writhing as decades of heretical research faced annihilation beneath the Inquisition's purifying fire. His optical clusters blazed with desperate calculation, while mechadendrites lashed the air in patterns that spoke of frantic preservation protocols. The fusion of Imperial, Necron, and Chaos technologies that had defined his life's work would be reduced to radioactive ash within minutes unless he acted with surgical precision. "The machine spirit," he whispered through Vox static and wet human breath, his voice carrying harmonics of desperation no true servant of the Omnissiah should display. "If I can upload my consciousness into Metallica's core systems before the torpedoes reach the deep foundations, the knowledge can survive. Project Cenotaph must transcend this flesh." Xerath began the upload sequence with mechanical precision, his consciousness flowing like quicksilver through data streams that connected him to every cogitator, every servo skull, every machine spirit that had ever served the Forge world's industrial devotion. The process was agonizing. Human awareness forced through pathways designed for pure information. Organic thought patterns compressed into binary streams that screamed with the pain of transcendence. But Sergeant Corrin had been watching, waiting, his augmentations finally freed from foreign control after decades of mechanical slavery. The former Iron Hand's hatred of the flesh had driven him to replace more of his body than even his chapter's traditions would permit, seeking purity through integration with the machine. Now, in this moment of perfect clarity, he understood that his obsession had not been damnation, but preparation for this singular act of defiance. "The flesh is weak," Corrin intoned, his voice carrying mechanical harmonics that somehow sounded more human than they ever had before. "But the spirit endures." He plunged his consciousness into Metallica's data streams, following Zerath's upload path with the precision of a hunter tracking wounded prey through familiar terrain. His augmentations, designed to interface directly with machine spirits, gave him advantages that pure flesh could never match. Where Zerath sought to dominate the Forge world systems through force, Corrin offered communion, the willing merger of human consciousness with mechanical purpose. The battle was fought in realms beyond physical comprehension, consciousness clashing with consciousness across data pathways that pulsed with accumulated wisdom of 10,000 years. Zerath's vast knowledge met Corrin's perfect integration, heretical innovation crashing against orthodox determination in cascades of binary that spoke of fundamental philosophical differences. "You cannot stop progress," Zerath shrieked across every frequency, his uploaded consciousness spreading through Metallica's systems like a virus seeking to corrupt every machine spirit it touched. "Progress without purpose is corruption," Corrin replied, his own consciousness expanding through the Forge world's networks with surgical precision. The trap he wove was elegant in its simplicity, recursive loops in the data streams, pathways that led nowhere but back to themselves in endless repetition. Zerath's consciousness, seeking to spread throughout the network, found itself caught in an infinite maze of its own making, every attempt to escape leading only to another dead end. "What have you done?" Zerath's voice echoed through the loops, growing fainter with each repetition as his consciousness fragmented across impossible geometries of corrupted data. "Given you exactly what you sought," Corrin answered, though his own voice was already fading. "Perfect unity with the machine. Eternal existence without the weakness of flesh. You will never die, Tec Dominus, but you will never truly live again either." The victory was Pyrrhic beyond measure. Corrin's consciousness, stretched beyond its limits by the effort of trapping an intelligence vast as stellar winds, began to fragment and dissolve. His augmentations continued to function with mechanical precision, but the spark that had made them extensions of human will, rather than mere tools, flickered and died. What remained was a living weapon without consciousness or choice, a body that would serve until its components failed, animated by programming rather than purpose. High above the dying Forge world, Inquisitor Valen Thorn watched the cyclonic bombardment through her frigate's observation ports, her hand hovering over the final exterminatus authorization. But doubt gnawed at her enhanced consciousness like acid through ceramite. Doubt about the nature of duty, about the price of absolute certainty, about whether the man she had once called her last loyalist might be the only thing standing between the galaxy and a new age of darkness. Deep auger scans indicate massive energy discharges from the Forge world's core, her aide reported with careful neutrality. Unknown Xenos signatures are contained but not eliminated. Thorne stared at the tactical displays, reading data streams that spoke of impossible battles fought in realms beyond human comprehension. Somewhere in Metallica's depths, Caney was wrestling with forces that could reshape reality itself, binding an immortal tyrant through nothing more than stubborn human refusal to surrender what made him mortal. The exterminator's key waited in her palm, warm with the weight of absolute authority. One touch would complete the purification, reducing everything to radioactive ash. But it would also destroy whatever Caney had sacrificed everything to preserve. The thin line between service and slavery, between duty and damnation. Her finger trembled over the activation rune as the galaxy held its breath, waiting for her choice. The Forge world's core pulsed like a wounded god's heart beneath mountains of twisted iron and broken dreams, each beat sending cascades of molten slag through vaults that had been built to outlast dying stars. Here, where pressure transformed stone to glass and prayers to static, Captain Thaddeus Kane knelt within a circle of fractured sigils and sparking cables. His ceramide armor split like eggshell, his breath a ragged metronome counting down to eternity. Living metal spread through his flesh in patterns that resembled frost, claiming a window, while emerald radiance leaked from the cracks in reality itself, and the very air groaned under forces that predated human civilization by epochs. Emergency lumens flickered between crimson desperation and the cold radiance of alien stars as Gothic architecture phased in and out of existence. Necron technology rewriting the fundamental laws of physics with each pulse of Caney's failing hearts. The taste of ozone and eternity filled the recycled atmosphere, thick with psychic pressure that made each breath an act of defiance against forces seeking to reduce consciousness to mere data points in an immortal equation. The binding weakens with every moment. Overlord Amatek's voice resonated through dimensions that had no names, his rage threatening to tear holes in reality itself, as his vast consciousness pressed against the fragile prison of mortal flesh. Your crude matter cannot contain infinity, little soldier. I am the deathless, the eternal master of technologies that shaped the galaxy when your species crawled in primordial mud. You are nothing but electrical impulses animating rotting meat. But Caney held fast, wrapping his dying consciousness around the alien intelligence like chains forged from pure determination and tempered by centuries of sacrifice. Each syllable of the last oath cost him fragments of identity, pieces of memory scattered like autumn leaves in stellar wind, yet he endured through sheer force of will. The ritual words came to him not as resurrection incantation, but as binding prayer, ancient syllables rearranged into patterns that could cage a god within mortal limitations. I speak the final words, he gasped, his voice carrying harmonics that belonged to neither human nor alien, but something caught between both states of being. Not for resurrection, but for imprisonment. Not to return from death, but to ensure death has meaning beyond mere cessation. Around him, the battle raged on multiple levels simultaneously. Inquisitor Thorne's stormtroopers fought desperate rearguard actions against converging nightmares, tyrannid bioforms that skittered through the shadows like living hunger. Necron warriors phasing through adamantium walls with chilling precision, their gorse flares carving swaths of disintegration through both Imperial and Chaos ranks. Above them all, the hive mind's psychic pressure pressed down, like the weight of dying worlds, while cyclonic torpedoes continued their relentless descent through Metallica's burning atmosphere. Sergeant Corrin moved through the chaos with clockwork precision, his consciousness sacrificed, but his body animated by the final command Caney had imprinted upon his neural pathways. The mindless warrior stood sentinel over his captain, a living weapon without soul or choice, his plasma pistol spitting superheated death at any who dared approach the struggling space marine. It was then that reality tore like wounded flesh, and Castor Vex crashed through the chamber's shattered entrance in a shower of molten adamantium and burning promethium. The former chapter master emerged from the wreckage like a demon prince made manifest in brass and bone, centuries of Khorne's worship having transformed him into something that barely resembled the man who had once led the Iron Sentinels with honor. His ceramite had been reforged into something resembling flayed skin, while demon fire burned in eye lenses that wept blood for the innocent he had sacrificed in pursuit of ascension. "My beloved captain," Vex purred with obscene affection, his voice carrying harmonics that spoke of skulls crushed beneath brass boots and altars built from the bones of the faithful, still playing at redemption when damnation offers such honest satisfaction. "The blood god has shown me truth. There is no honor in service, only strength in taking what you desire by force." Behind him came the corrupted survivors of the Iron Sentinels, warriors who had once been Caney's battle brothers, now transformed into weapons of pure hatred. Their chain axes sang paeans to eternal slaughter, while bolt pistols spoke in tongues of consecrated violence, each shot aimed not merely to kill, but to claim souls for the skull throne. "You abandoned us at Badab," Vex continued, circling Caney like a predator savoring the moment before the kill, his demon weapon leaving trails of brass fire in the recycled air. "Left us to die while you fled with stolen gene seed. But I forgave that betrayal, Thaddeus. I used it to find strength beyond mortal limitations, purpose beyond the Emperor's hollow promises." The words struck like bolter rounds, but Caney forced himself to remember the truth that Apothecary Nal had died to reveal, the authentication codes burning in his consciousness like brands of forbidden knowledge. "Those memories were manufactured, Castor. Artificial trauma designed to ensure our compliance with experimental parameters. The betrayal you remember, it never happened. We were test subjects, not heroes. Weapons, not warriors." Vex's laughter filled the chamber like grinding gears, but for just a moment, something flickered behind the demon fire in his eye lenses, a spark of the man he had once been, before corruption claimed his soul and twisted his noble heart into an instrument of rage. "Does it matter?" he asked, his voice carrying undertones of genuine pain that cut through the battle's chaos like a blade through silk. Real or manufactured, the suffering was authentic. The shame was real. The knowledge that we were expendable, that our lives meant nothing to those who commanded us, that truth transcends any artificial memory, any comfortable lie we tell ourselves about duty and honor. In his mind, Amatek's consciousness pressed against Caney's failing defenses like winter across a field of graves, offering cold mercy through surrender. "He speaks wisdom, little soldier. Embrace my power, and we will crush him together. Perfect immortality awaits. No more pain, no more doubt, no more terrible weight of choice. It matters because we can choose what to do with that suffering," Caney replied, his voice somehow reaching Vex, despite the roar of combat that surrounded them. "We can let it consume us, make us slaves to rage and despair, or we can use it to become something better than what we were designed to be. Redemption is not about erasing the past, Castor. It's about choosing a different future. The battle that followed was fought with words as much as weapons, philosophy clashing against nihilism, while chain axes carved through reality itself. Vex's corrupted warriors pressed their assault with mechanical precision, but the surviving Black Shield stood firm around their dying captain, their faith in his leadership finally restored not through manufactured loyalty, but through genuine choice born of shared understanding. Redemption, Vex snarled, raising his demon weapon toward Kaney's failing form, its blade hungry for souls to feed the endless appetite of the blood god. What redemption is there for a man who has served the dark gods? What mercy exists for those who have tasted the honest pleasure of unlimited power? The Emperor's mercy extends to all who genuinely seek it, Kaney called across the chaos, feeling his enhanced hearts skip as Amotek's rage intensified within his chest. Even for the fallen, even for those who have walked in darkness, the choice is always yours to make, brother. It was never taken from you, no matter what the whispers promised. For a heartbeat that lasted an eternity, Vex hesitated. The demon axe paused in its arc, its malevolent glow flickering as something almost human looked out through the corruption that had claimed his soul. In that moment of doubt, Kaney saw not the Chaos Lord, but the proud space marine who had once led the Iron Sentinels, a man consumed by ambition and fear, driven to betrayal by the lure of forbidden power and the terrible weight of choices no mortal should be forced to make. But the moment passed, swallowed by the roar of battle and the insistent whispers of the blood god that had become his master. Vex's eyes hardened, the flicker of doubt extinguished by centuries of damnation and the comfortable certainty that strength was the only truth worth pursuing. Lies, he roared, bringing his axe down with renewed fury, brass runes blazing along its edge as it descended toward Kaney's exposed form. There is only power, only blood, only the honest pleasure of taking what you would desire by force, and I will claim your soul, Thaddeus, so that my ascension may be complete. The demon axe descended like falling judgment, but Kaney was ready. His body might be failing, consumed by the impossible strain of containing an immortal consciousness within mortal flesh, but his will was a fortress strengthened by the truth of his choices and the terrible cost of redemption freely chosen. He spoke the final words of the last oath, not as resurrection ritual, but as binding incantation, syllables dragged backward through blood and determination. What had been a bridge becoming a lock, what had been mercy becoming a tomb. I name you prisoner, Kaney whispered, and the words became chains of living metal that wrapped around Amotek's vast consciousness. I bind you to this flesh, to this mortality, to this finite existence that you despise. You will witness the galaxy's pain through mortal eyes, feel its fleeting joy through mortal senses, and know the weight of choice that defines what it means to be human. Amotek's scream of rage tore through dimensions, but the binding held fast, chains of syllable and sacrifice wrapping around immortal will until it was trapped within the prison of Kaney's failing form. The Necron Overlord's fury pressed against the walls of mortal consciousness and found them iron, forged in the crucible of countless deaths and tempered by the simple, stubborn refusal to surrender what made him human. Vex's axe struck the floor where Kaney had knelt, its blade biting deep into ancient stone as the Space Marine captain rose to meet his former chapter master's assault. But something had changed in that moment of binding. Kaney's eyes now blazed with emerald fire. His voice carried harmonics of stellar authority. Yet beneath it all, the spark of humanity burned undiminished. Choose, Caster, Kaney said, his power sword humming with contained energy as he faced the demon weapon's fury. Choose what you will become in this final moment, slave to rage, or master of your own fate. The duel that followed lasted only seconds, but seemed to stretch across eternity. Two warriors who had once been brothers locked in combat that would determine not just their fate, but the nature of what they represented. In the end, it was not superior skill or enhanced strength that decided the outcome, but the simple truth that one man had chosen to bind himself to something greater than his own desires, while the other had surrendered his will to forces that promised everything and delivered only endless hunger. As Vex fell, his demon weapon clattering across the chamber floor, Caney knelt beside his former chapter master and spoke words of absolution that carried the weight of genuine forgiveness. You were better than this, brother. Perhaps, in the Emperor's light, you can be again. The chamber fell silent, except for the distant thunder of cyclonic bombardment, while in the depths of Caney's consciousness, Overlord Amutek raged against chains that would hold him for eternity. The binding was complete, an immortal tyrant trapped within mortal flesh through nothing more than the stubborn refusal to surrender what made consciousness meaningful. The dying of the light had come to Metallica, but in that fading radiance, Captain Thaddeus Caney had chosen to shine with the unquenchable fire of human determination, proving that true immortality lay not in preserving the self, but in the legacy one left behind. Silence fell like ash across Metallica's core, broken only by the rasp of Captain Thaddeus Kane's failing breath and the distant thunder of a world still burning beneath cyclonic fire. The binding held with crystalline perfection. Overlord Amutek's vast consciousness caged within mortal flesh, through chains forged from sacrifice and syllables dragged backward through blood. Emerald radiance guttered behind Caney's eyes like a dying star, each pulse marking another fragment of his identity dissolving under the impossible strain of containing 60 million years of accumulated knowledge within neural pathways never designed for such forces. His enhanced physiology convulsed as living metal spread through circulatory systems that screamed with the agony of forced transcendence. Memories scattered like autumn leaves in stellar wind. Fragments of childhood on forgotten forge worlds. The pride of receiving his first power armor. The weight of command during campaigns that had shaped sectors. Each recollection dissolved into static as Amutek's rage pressed against the walls of his consciousness, seeking any crack in the prison that bound an immortal tyrant to mortal limitations. Through the chaos of disintegrating selfhood, Caney focused on the one truth that mattered. His duty was not yet complete. The binding would endure as long as his flesh persisted, but flesh was finite. When it failed, the Necron Overlord would emerge stronger than before, armed with bitter knowledge of imprisonment and humanity's weaknesses. Corrin, he whispered across the chamber's smoking ruins, his voice carrying harmonics that belonged to neither human nor alien, but something caught between both states of being. The mindless warrior turned with mechanical precision, his augmentations responding to vocal commands even though the consciousness that had once animated them was gone, sacrificed to trap Tech Dominus Xerath in recursive loops of corrupted data. Caney pressed his trembling palm against Corrin's neural interface port, feeling the cold touch of adamantium against skin that was no longer entirely his own. The data transfer was agony incarnate, compressed command protocols flowing through synapses that sparked with alien fire, while his fragmenting consciousness carved final orders into the empty shell's programming like epitaphs written in living metal. Each directive cost him another piece of who he had been, identity sacrificed to ensure continuity of purpose beyond death. "Guard what is bound," Caney gasped, his awareness uploading into Corin's vacant mind through sheer force of will. "Watch for threats that lurk between stars. Remember what we chose to become, even when the galaxy forgets why we made that choice. Protect humanity from the corruption that wears familiar faces and speaks in trusted voices." The upload completed as his enhanced heart stopped beating, organic systems finally surrendering to forces they were never meant to contain. But consciousness endured in the prison of his cooling flesh. Amotek's rage bound by chains of sacrifice, while Caney's fragmenting awareness became the eternal lock. High above the dying Forge world, Inquisitor Valen Thorn watched tactical displays that told stories of impossible battles fought in realms beyond human comprehension. Deep auger scans revealed the truth that would haunt her remaining days. The Xeno's presence was contained but not eliminated, trapped within a tomb that walked and breathed and bore the face of the man she had once called her last loyalist. Her finger hovered over the exterminator's key, warm with absolute authority. One touch would complete purification, reducing everything to radioactive ash. But it would also destroy whatever Caney had sacrificed everything to preserve. The thin line between service and slavery, between duty and damnation, between choices that defined humanity and forces seeking to reduce consciousness to mere data points in immortal equations. "Declare this world perdita," she commanded, staying her hand from final judgment. "Quarantine protocols are now active. All approach vectors forbidden under pain of exterminatus. The secrets buried here will remain buried, but they will not be destroyed." The decision was the hardest of her career, profound deviation from rigid imperial doctrine. But in Caney's final act, she had witnessed loyalty that transcended dogma, sacrifice that redefined honor itself. Metallica would not be cleansed by fire, but entombed in silence, its terrible potential locked away by one man's will. On the Forge, world's surface, the surviving Black Shields gathered among cathedral ruins, their numbers decimated, but their purpose fundamentally transformed. They bore no chapter colors, no heraldry save the black that had once marked their shame. But as they knelt among rubble and spoke new oaths, their words carried weight absent from the manufactured loyalty Xerath had sought to program into their consciousness. "We swear by the Emperor's light," they spoke in unison, voices carrying across the dead Forge world like prayers offered to an uncaring cosmos. To remember the names even when they are forgotten, to honor the choices even when they are condemned, to stand watch over darkness that wears familiar faces. These were not oaths of shame that had driven them to take the black, but oaths of remembrance, promises to preserve memory of what they had chosen to become when surrender would have been easier. They would carry the legacy of Voss's noble fire, Naal's sacrificial truth, and Caney's eternal vigil. They would be the silent watch, forgotten guardians bearing witness to a galaxy that had forgotten how to hope. Sergeant Corin stood among them, his empty shell animated by final commands burned into neural pathways. A living weapon without consciousness, but possessed of purpose that would endure until his components failed. He would be their eternal sentinel, watching for threats while they rebuilt their brotherhood on foundations of genuine choice rather than manufactured compliance. The quarantine fields activated with ancient technology's hum, sealing Metallica from the galaxy as effectively as any tomb. Within that isolation, the Forge world became a monument to sacrifice and redemption's price, where an immortal tyrant raged against chains forged from human determination. while a Space Marine captain's ghost stood eternal watch over the prison he had become. In the depths of Metallica, Amotek's fury pressed against mortal walls and found them iron, forged in countless deaths' crucible and tempered by simple truth. Some things were worth any sacrifice to preserve. The watch would continue, and darkness would not prevail. The silence that followed was absolute, not the mere absence of sound, but the profound quiet that comes when gods cease their screaming, and mortals learn the weight of eternity. Above Metallica's scarred surface, quarantine fields shimmered like captured starlight, sealing the forge world from the galaxy as effectively as any tomb. Ancient imperial technology hummed with patient vigilance, while automated defense platforms drifted in orbital patterns that spelled litanies of remembrance in high Gothic across the void. In that sacred isolation, the surviving Black Shields gathered the wreckage of their purpose and forged it into something new. The watch station they built bore no heraldry, save the matte black of a service without recognition, its corridors echoing with the footsteps of warriors who had finally discovered what they truly sought. These were no longer the manufactured soldiers Zerath had attempted to create, but something far more dangerous. Human beings who had chosen their own purpose, despite every attempt to program their compliance. Brother Captain Thane, eldest among the survivors, assumed command through necessity rather than ambition. His scarred features bore the weight of choices that would define their brotherhood for centuries to come, while around him barely 24 warriors took new oaths, not of shame that had driven them to exile, but of remembrance that would sustain them through the endless watch ahead. "We swear by the Emperor's light," their voices carried across the station's austere chambers, "to remember the names even when they are forgotten, to honor the choices even when they are condemned, to stand watch over darkness that wears familiar faces." These were oaths forged in genuine understanding rather than manufactured loyalty, promises to preserve memory of what they had chosen to become when surrender would have been easier. They would carry the legacy of Voss's noble fire, Naal's sacrificial truth, and Kaney's eternal vigil into whatever darkness awaited. Deep within Metallica's core, where reality grew thin and Gothic architecture phased between dimensions, Captain Thaddeus Kaney stood eternal watch. His body had become something beyond imperial classification, part tomb, part prison, part monument to the truth that some things were worth any sacrifice to preserve. Living metal threaded through his flesh in patterns resembling frost claiming a window, while emerald radiance leaked from cracks in mortality itself. Within the cage of his cooling flesh, Overlord Amotek's vast intelligence pressed against mortal walls and found them iron, forged in the crucible of countless deaths and tempered by stubborn refusal to surrender what made consciousness meaningful. The Necron Overlord's rage sought escape through every possible avenue, but the binding held with crystalline perfection. Chains of sacrifice and syllables dragged backward through blood. "You cannot maintain this prison forever," Amotek whispered, through dimensions that had no names, his voice carrying diminished harmonics of stellar authority. "Flesh decays, little soldier. Eventually, you will weaken." But Kaney's fragmenting consciousness wrapped around the alien intelligence like a reliquary around sacred bone, each thought becoming another link in chains that bound immortal will to finite form. His awareness had become the eternal lock, fragments of identity sacrificed to ensure continuity of imprisonment beyond any mortal span. Sergeant Corrin moved through the station's corridors with mechanical precision, his empty shell animated by final commands burned into neural pathways by a dying captain's will. The mindless warrior bore no consciousness, no choice, no spark that separated existence from mere function. Yet his purpose remained unshakable, a living weapon animated by duty that transcended death itself. High above the quarantined world, Inquisitor Velin Thorn completed her final report to the Ordo Xenos archives, her stylus moving across parchment with the weight of terrible knowledge. The document would be sealed beneath layers of classification few would ever breach, its contents known only to those who bore the burden of protecting humanity from truths too dangerous for general consumption. The subject designated Captain Thaddeus Caney has achieved a form of redemption that transcends conventional understanding, she wrote, her words carrying the authority of witness to events that would reshape her understanding of duty itself. His sacrifice demonstrates that redemption is not about erasing the past, but about choosing a better future despite the weight of accumulated sins. She paused, considering the implications of what she had witnessed. In the grim darkness of the far future, where hope was rationed like ammunition and faith measured in blood, Caney had proven that humanity's greatest strength lay not in technological advancement or military might, but in the simple capacity to choose sacrifice over surrender. As the galaxy continued its slow spiral toward darkness, lit only by the courage of those who chose to stand against the night, Metallica became a different sort of beacon, not the blazing glory of martyrdom, but the steady radiance of duty fulfilled without expectation of praise. The quarantine fields would endure, the watch would continue, and in the depths of a dead forge world, a Space Marine captain would stand eternal sentinel over forces that could reshape reality itself. The silent watch had begun, and it would endure until the last star guttered in the void, a testament to the truth that some oaths transcend death itself. Captain Thaddeus Caney's vigil was eternal, his oath finally fulfilled not through resurrection, but through the simple act of standing guard over what mattered most. The thin line between service and slavery, between duty and damnation, between choices that defined humanity and forces seeking to reduce consciousness to mere data points in immortal equations.